Greetings and good vibes. This is Erika with another Q and Q. And again, Q and Q means questions and queries. How do you ensure that all cameras are in sync and capturing the action effectively? For me, that huge change happened when I started using the Blackmagic ATEMs. I used one of the 4-slot ones a couple of times, and then I got an 8-slot one. And I don't have to ensure that they're all in sync. I can literally see that they're all in sync because I put up the multi-view and I'll watch all 3, 4, 5, up to 8 cameras simultaneously. I can literally see them all. I can tell, especially if it's a Blackmagic camera that's plugged into it, we can adjust, the ISO, we can adjust the frame rate, we can adjust the color, we can adjust all of that right there from the deck. I prefer not doing that. I would prefer to have the camera operator do it, but it's nice having the ability if something weird is happening with the camera, again, especially if it's the Blackmagics. But the fact that we put everything into the ATEM, I don't have to do anything to ensure that. I can literally see if they're working. And we do some HDMIs straight into the board, and I've also been doing a fair amount of wireless HDMIs, and there is just the tiniest bit of delay, but that delay has never affected anything that was going on where it was causing any kind of a problem. It's such a small amount that I don't have any issues with it. The hardest thing to make sure is right is the audio. And so I only have 1 or 2 different audio sources that are actually being recorded in the board. Everything else, when I say board, I mean the ATEM itself. The only times I've ever had issues with sync problems is when I've allowed multiple cameras throughout the room, when I've allowed them to input their audio signal into the board. And that's when I've had problems, when you've got multiple audio signals, because even if you've got very short HDMI cables plugged into them, there's always going to be weird delays, and then you're getting audio echoes. And the moment that happens, again, audiences hate that. It's just going to sound terrible. So I like to make sure that the cameras are recording the audio internally, but actually going into the ATEM. And if we're doing just a record, or if we're doing a record and a live stream, I will only have 1 or 2 microphones, maybe a couple more if they're going into the same audio recorder. Generally only 1 or 2 microphones capturing everything going straight into the board. That way I don't have to worry about audio sync issues, because audio sync issues are really annoying. How do you prepare for potential technical difficulties or equipment failures? I mean, I don't know if you can prepare for equipment failures other than having backups of things. So rehearsing things, making sure the technical people know what they're doing, and really having backups. And the irritating thing about backups is the more backups you have, the more gear you have to carry. The heavier everything is, the more stuff of it there that you have. And it just gets so messy when you have extra gear. So if I'm in a new space, I'll bring a lot of extra stuff. If I'm in a space I've been in many times before, I know who my operators are. I know who the person, the vision swisher that's sitting at the board. If I know everybody, it's in a space, I'll limit the amount of extra stuff that I'll bring with. And if I know that there's stuff in the theater, if that could be power cables, that could be TVs or monitors, extension cables, like whatever we might need. If I know some of it's going to be there, I'll just not bring it with, because I know I'm going to be able to find it. But really having backups, having an experienced crew, and keeping things as simple as possible is the best way to deal with that. What's your strategy for setting up camera angles and positions? My strategy is experiment. I like experimenting. I like trying different things. I like having a mix where whenever I can, obviously I can't always do it, I like having close-ups, mediums, wide shots. I like high cameras, in the back of the stage where it's pointing out towards the audience. So you can see the performers, like the back of their heads on stage, and you can see the audience laughing. I also like really severe side angles. So anytime I can put cameras in the wings, doesn't really matter which wing it is, but if I can put a camera where it's cutting across, and that way you can see people when they're walking forwards and they're walking back, and you can really see what's going on that way. So I really like that as well. I don't know. And also elevation. I mentioned the high camera in the back. The side cameras I usually keep around eye level. The cameras that are out in the audience, I actually prefer them to be at eye level or even higher. I prefer the angle looking down slightly. When you have a camera below a person that's looking up, you get this weird, people, that's not a very flattering angle having the camera pointed up. So if it's in front, I want it at eye level or a little bit higher. And then I really like putting one or two cameras on the floor. That could be on the floor in one of the front corners, pointed up towards the performers, or that could be at the back of the theater on the floor, pointed out, where you can see a little bit of the audience on the ground, but you're getting this really intense high view upwards of the performers walking around on stage. So I guess my answer is I like variety. Close up, medium, wide, different elevations, different angles. I like to throw in a black and white camera here and there. You can do that in post if you just decide afterwards you want to pull out the saturation. I like setting up a black and white camera because I want to make sure it's going to look exactly how I want the black and white to look afterwards. But I like that just because I think it kind of adds a little bit of a different dimension to what you're looking at. But for me, it's variety, it's having fun, it's playing around. And it's picking good cameras that you can match in post if you don't happen to have 2, 4, 8, whatever it is, cameras that are all identical to each other. How do you handle live audience interactions or reactions? Audience interactions. I have to assume does that mean talking to the audience? Handle live audience. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's talking to the audience. I would assume that's mostly going to be the host slash MC. But I do a lot of stuff with improv, and there's a lot of times that the improv people will ask the audience directly questions, most of the time to do with their improv, whatever they want to do next. Musicians, if clapping, getting the audience to stand up, shouting things back at them. I mean, there's audience interactions that way. I love all that stuff. So when I'm running something, I always tell whoever the performers are, have fun with that. Like, make it your own. Whatever you want to do, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever interaction you want to have with the audience, go for it. Like, have fun. Like, really let your personality shine. That's what I tend to say to the performers that are on stage. Audience reactions? Oh, I mean, does that just mean laughing? I mean, laughing means we're doing a good job. Yeah, I'm not sure if I know what audience reactions means, if it's anything other than laughing or responding, because heckling isn't really a reaction. If you know what audience reaction means, write it down below and I'll try to figure out who asked that question to see if I can give a better answer next time around. How does your experience in theater inform the way you direct film and vice versa? Hugely, 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 hugely affects the way I do everything in film. And I've been doing this for a long time, and every single person I've ever interacted with that was a film director that has never done live stuff or never done theater, we think very different from each other. Theater, there's quite a lot of differences, but the two biggest differences, I would say, number one, a theater performer, theater director, whatever word you want to put in front of theater people understand the entirety of whatever the piece is. Whether it's a musical or a straight play or whatever it is, whatever the performance is, they know everything completely locked inside their head from the moment the show starts all the way through to the end. They know what all of the arcs are. They know where the comedy is. They know where the drama is. They know where the scene changes are and how they need to approach the scene in order for two scenes down to have the payoff to whatever they're doing in this scene. They get the big picture. And I don't mean that as a cliche. I mean, literally, they come in, they know the whole thing from beginning to end, and they can play all those tiny little beats throughout the whole thing from beginning to end. Film actors, and obviously there's actors that do both, film actors really understand singular moments because that's literally what you're filming. You're filming just a singular moment. So you get out of bed that day, you come into work, and you know you're doing a page and a half. And for that day, you need to be able to nail whatever's happening in that page and a half. If the character is, has a hangover and they just woke up, that is what you're playing for that page and a half, is this person who's, feels like death. They just had an awful, or maybe, well, they had a wonderful night, but they're having an awful waking up moment. You just need to be able to nail the moment from saying action to the moment saying cut. You just have to be able to nail whatever you're doing in that moment. Doesn't necessarily mean you have a great handle on the whole story. You definitely should, but not everybody does. You just have to be able to nail singular moments as they're happening throughout the whole show. And for me, same thing with directing. If I'm directing it, I know every single up and down, and I know when it gets loud and when it gets quiet, because you build all of that variety in the rehearsals so that when it comes to showtime, everybody is just following the roadmap that you've already made. The roadmap changes a little bit depending on, audience reaction to stuff, but you have the whole thing and you know intimately where every single little bit is versus just nailing one little tiny thing at a time. Yeah, I think that's it. How do you manage time constraints and keeping the show on schedule? If you're working on a film production, you have a good first AD. If you're working on some kind of, television or broadcast, you have a good, floor manager or whoever else it is that's keeping stuff on schedule. And if you're doing theater, you have a good stage manager. End of answer. I jokingly say those three people are the person who walks around on stage with the web. All right. 3 minutes from now, everybody, 3 minutes from now, get on stage in costume, be ready to go. Like, they're the ones who do that. So you don't want to be the director and having to do that. You want another person who's watching the time, who's calling people, who's giving people, however many minutes out, if it's 15, 10, 5, 1, like whatever the numbers are, that's everybody's preference, doesn't matter. But you have someone who is doing that. You do not want it to be the director because they've got too many things going on. And when I'm a stage manager and I'm helping somebody else direct, I'm more than happy to keep everything on schedule. But it's the person who's keeping everything on track. That's the person who's doing all of that. As far as constraints go, if you're running up against the time, if you're the director and you've got whatever, again, TV, film, theater, whatever it is, you have that person telling you, we need to move on to the next thing in 17 minutes. The time that it's most important that they tell you that is when they know that there's multiple things you wanted to do, and now you've only got 17 minutes. So as far as managing, that's when it comes down to you as the director. You need to decide what is it that you absolutely have to get done in the next 17 minutes. And are there a couple things that you wanted to rehearse in person that you can just explain verbally and hope that people get? And what is it that you absolutely have to run through? If it's a technical thing, if it's some kind of a lighting change, you're probably going to have to do that. You're not going to be able to, skip that part. But if it's normally we have you come in from, stage right, this time come in from stage left. Or if it's a film thing, the last time we were talking about you holding your mug the whole time. This time, I just want you to put your mug down in the middle. That's the sort of thing that you can probably get away just telling them verbally. Rehearsing it is obviously better, but there's when you're having to manage time constraints in that way, you have to be able to make the right decision. What do you absolutely have to get done in the time that you have, and what can you explain or do in some other way?